Wonderful. All right, we are finishing up Ecclesiastes this morning. We're on 6:18, 6:19. We're going to go through chapters 9 through 12. And when I first got in this morning, I just shared with a couple people that were here that it has been fun studying Ecclesiastes. I watched the last two videos and the discussion, and even going through it has just been a joy and something that I wish we learned more about. I especially wish we had learned and gone through the book of Ecclesiastes growing up, because I think it would have saved me a lot of trouble personally. But it was also just, it feels so relatable. It feels like, I think Pastor Rebecca talked about it, reading like a diary. And I think about my angsty teen diaries that I had growing up, and some of the stuff that I see here, stuff that I said, right? Everything is meaningless at the end of the day. Does it even matter? Right? But it lives in the in-between. Ecclesiastes says, right? It lives in this beautiful gray area of everything is meaningless and enjoy life because it's worth living, right?
And it's in between Proverbs and Song of Solomon.
Oh my God, yes. I have a feeling someone knew what they were doing when they put Ecclesiastes there for sure. Yeah.
And now for a change of pace.
Yes, I know. And I love that it's part of the wisdom literature, right? Like that's so, I didn't know that. And I think that's so funny and so beautiful that it's part of the wisdom literature. But I just wanted to remind us of a couple things that Pastor Rebecca and Renee brought up, right? So the words vanity, the word toil, wisdom, and faith are prominent throughout the whole chapter. It does not end. It is very thorough about using all of those words all the way until the end. And I love what Renee said last week too. It's like an older person trying to pass on wisdom to a younger person, right? This advice for life. And I think it's also just timely, right? Given the season, right? People are graduating. Spring is seen as new birth and life. And I don't know, I wish this was studied intergenerational, right? I wish that we could talk about this with our children and with our grandchildren and, with families. I wish it was studied in a kind of communal setting, because I bet, again, there are moments in life where these moments where you're like, what is the point of it all? Which I think we have every so years of trying to figure out, where is our place in this world? Does it even matter? And I'm assuming y'all tell me it doesn't end, right? It doesn't end even until whatever age y'all are at, right? It continues throughout life of like the question of what I just did the last 5-10 years. Does it even make sense to the trajectory of my life? Did it have meaning? Did it have purpose? What did I gain? Or what did it matter in the bigger scheme of things, the grander scheme of things? So let's start off with chapter 9, verses 1 through 12, because it again does a really good job of summarizing what the author is talking about throughout the whole book. So Grace, if you don't mind reading verses 1 through 6, and then Cheryl 7 through 12, please.
Take life as it comes. All this I laid to heart, examining it all, how the righteous and the wise and their deeds are in the hand of God. Whether it is love or hate, one does not know. Everything that confronts them is vanity, since the same fate comes to all, to the righteous and the wicked, to the good and the evil, to the clean and the unclean, to those who sacrifice and those who do not sacrifice. As are the good, so are the sinners. Those who swear are like those who shun an oath. This is an evil in all that happens under the sun, that the same fate comes to everyone. Moreover, the hearts of all are full of evil. Madness is in their hearts while they live, and after that they go to the dead. But whoever is joined with all the living has hope. For a living dog is better than a dead lion. The living know that they will die, but the dead know nothing. They have no more reward. And even the memory of them is lost. Their love and their hate and their envy have already perished. Never again will they have any share in all that happens under the sun.
Go, eat your bread with enjoyment, and drink your wine with a merry heart. For God has long ago approved what you do. Let your garments always be white. Do not let oil be lacking on your head. Enjoy life with the you love. All the days of your vain life are given you under the sun, because that is your portion in life, and in your toil at which you toil under the sun. Whatever your hand finds to do, do with your might. For there is no work or thought or knowledge or wisdom in Sheol to which you are going. Again, I saw that under the sun, the race is not to the swift, nor the battle to the strong, nor bread to the wise, nor riches to the intelligent, nor favor to the skillful. But time and chance happen to them all. For no one can anticipate the time of disaster. Like fish taken in a cruel net, like birds caught in a snare. So mortals are snared at a time of calamity, when it suddenly falls upon them.
Thank you both. Good morning, Betty and Bill. We're in chapter 9, verses 1 through 12.
Oh, there's Bill.
Yes.
Good morning.
All right. So I heard some laughter at a couple parts. What stood out to you in the first 12 verses here?
Well,
I
that
think
we
I
all,
grew- I grew up with elderly people that knew these words.
Yeah.
They didn't sit down and open the book and read them to me, but I remember hearing these words, do not be quick to anger. And I think Paul picks that up too, or that you find some of these repeated in the epistles, but it's not just folk wisdom, it's good mental health.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And I guess that seemed funny to me, that it would be better to have a live dog than a dead lion. I mean, what would you do with a dead lion? It'd be hard to get rid of the carcass.
That juxtaposition is huge, right? And it's
Mhm.
really funny too, just thinking about it in this context, because lions were seen as this like majestic being. They represented the king, they were royalty, and a dog was like a measly thing in the street that just was annoying and bothersome, right? But still, it's better to have an alive dog than a dead lion, right? Yeah, what do you do? Mary
Mhm.
Jane, I think you were gonna say something.
Yeah, I was going to say that this is quite different than the vision of life that I grew up with at church, because the one I grew up with early on was all about being good so that you can get to heaven later. This doesn't even smack of that. This just,
Yeah.
this is it. Enjoy it.
Yeah.
Yeah, like on verse 7, go, eat your bread with enjoyment and drink your wine with a merry heart. For God has long ago approved what you do.
That's lovely.
Yeah.
It is lovely. Yeah.
That's lovely.
Yeah.
This is what's been created and designed for you. You know, you're not doing anything wrong by doing these things.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And the oil for your head, it smacks of being anointed. by
Yes.
God. And I thought, we spend a lot of dollars at wherever we shop for stuff for our hair. And so did they.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. So going back to verse 7, that was a really good call out, Cheryl, especially, right? It's not that God has like given you a blank check and has said, go just run with the wind, like go do whatever you want, everything's forgiven, you can I think there's a specific type of thought that happened after Jesus is resurrection. I can't think of the name of that specific school of thought where it's like, well, Jesus is coming back anyways, or well, we're already forgiven, so we can just do whatever we want. That's not what is being said here. But what you pointed to, Cheryl, that a long time ago, God created all things good. God created humans good. And humans should take time to be alive and to enjoy it, right? That's one of the biggest things too that I was going through this is I grew up with the like doctrine of depravity, right? Is that you were born since the moment that you are like essentially conceived in your mother's womb, you are a sinful, terrible human being.
Yeah.
And your whole life is to not be a terrible, sinful.
You have to be.
Yeah, it's to not be a sinful, terrible human being. Right. And you really can't enjoy life because if it's not about God and it's not about Jesus, not about the Holy Spirit in every single aspect in your life, then you are completely missing the mark. Right. And missing the mark alludes to kind of that sinner language. Right. That's what it literally means. It's missing the mark. And so I personally grew up with this idea of like, it doesn't matter what I look like. Right. Who cares? Because all of my life is for Jesus. And so I grew up with self-esteem issues because I didn't know how to take care of my hair. I didn't know how to take care of what I wore, right? But it didn't matter at the end of the day because it didn't matter to Jesus, right? And it didn't matter that I, was depressed because at the end of the day, I'm going to die and I'm going to go to heaven. And that's all that really matters. Like, I just have to get through this lifetime as a sinful, terrible person. And I deserve it to be hard because at the end of the day, it'll be worth it. Right. Right. And this says, no, enjoy the life you have now. And I think it goes even further in saying there's more than enough for everyone. It doesn't say it explicitly, but everyone deserves to be comfortable. Everyone deserves to enjoy life.
Because all are the same.
Because all are the same and all's fates will be the same at the end. Right. So what are we doing in the grand scheme of things to make sure that it happens and that it's true? Michael, I see a hand over there. What are you thinking?
What I don't see is that it is good to help others to enjoy life. It's all for yourself. I'm not a be good so you go to heaven person. I'm a be good because that's the right thing to do for others. And that isn't here.
Well, it's gonna show up. Hang on.
Yeah.
It comes to everyone. It says that, but it doesn't say anything about helping your neighbor or loving your neighbor or comforting the sick or feeding the hungry or anything like that. It says live for yourself.
We'll see if some of that comes in before we finish.
That's what I'm thinking. I'm
And it may not, we'll see.
I would say it doesn't come out explicitly. I'll just say that. So I think it's a lot of interpretation. I think it's a lot of, this is one piece of wisdom that is included in the whole writings. And even then, right, I think either Pastor Rebecca or Renee said, there is no thought of eternal life. There is no afterthought. There really is no heaven for them, right? They go to Sheol, which is just a literal resting place. It's where you go when you die. And what happens is you just rest. There's no afterlife. There's no party. There's no these ideas of like heaven and afterlife that we hold to be true. It's more like you live life. And I think even within like surrounding the scriptures, right? There's the Talmud, the other writings that surround the Hebrew scriptures that talk about the importance of care, how to live your life, right? So I would say that for someone like me, right, who grew up with that kind of idea of depravity, this is helpful in saying you can enjoy your life. And you know that it's important to also help others. And it's important to also, you can take care of yourself. It's not just about taking care of other people, which I feel like a lot of the other parts of scripture do allude to talk to explicitly, right? Not every verse is saying, go help your neighbor and make sure you're also taken care of and looking good. It's just go feed the hungry, go clothe and go help the sick, right? None of that is included in make sure that you and your household are doing okay, because if you're not, you can't help other people.
Mhm.
And I think this is one way to interpret that, of saying, make sure you're doing good, make sure you're seeing life as enjoyable, because we know that if that is true, if you are not hungry, if you are not tired, if you are not weary, it is so much easier to care for other people.
Yeah.
And I know you kind of talked about that last week with Renee and Steve mentioned, being hungry, but we know that it's true, right? That it's easier to help others and to enjoy life when you have your basic necessities met,
Mhm.
right? Eat the bread, drink the wine, because you were created to do so. And then eventually, as we'll see in scripture, extend that table, extend that meal, make it for all are welcome,
Mhm.
right? So I think this is a small microcosm in the bigger picture of it all. And for some people, I think it's helpful in saying, I'm not a terrible human being. I don't have to pay, for something or some idea. I get to enjoy life.
Yeah.
Right? And you are totally open to disagreeing with me on that. And that is totally fine.
It feels like it's the antidote in a way to original sin
Mhm.
and takes us into original blessing.
Mm,
God's loved you from the first moment.
yep,
Yeah.
yeah.
It does say send out your bread upon the waters, but there is a kind of a enlightened self-interest.
Yeah.
That just follows that up, so it's not because it is good to send things to others, it's because it's going to come back to you.
Yep.
And I think even the people are, faith communities that say you were all born in sin. So, no, you were created in love and it was good.
Mhm.
And then you wandered off. You weren't created to wander off. You chose that because you had free will.
Yep.
Doesn't mean you can't wander back or to be
Yep.
snatched back.
Yeah.
But the people that teach that don't have a clear understanding of God's creation. God loved us so much that we got created,
Yeah.
not to fail, but to experience
Yeah.
all that there is.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And I think something that isn't, again, explicitly mentioned, it is kind of that vanity, right? Like what happens when you don't enjoy life and instead you're trying to grasp at like power and greed and accumulation, right? Those people also don't enjoy life. People who are searching for more and a way to disadvantage others, we know that they also don't actually enjoy life, right? We see it time and time again. I wonder often too with these, people who have the wealth and the power, they also struggle with mental health and with,
And if they don't, their kids do.
yeah,
I mean, it's just
exactly.
horrendous.
Yeah. But it's part of life, right? Sometimes you don't even enjoy it when you're trying to accumulate so much greed and wealth. And it's not saying there are parts of it where this author is, someone with empowered, wants to keep that and hold on to it. But and then sometimes it's saying power is meaningless. It's not worth it, right? Again, what's it to a dead lion versus an alive dog, right? Who cares if you have all of that, if you're not even enjoying any of it? And what does enjoyment usually look like? It looks like sharing it with other people in community.
Yeah.
In the way that Acts talks about it, right? We don't often reference that, but they didn't give everything away, the landowners. They gave some of their plots of land because they had more than enough so that other people who didn't have anything or didn't have enough could have something, could have a baseline to start with.
No matter how much power you manage to finagle for yourself, it says here, no one has power over the wind or power over the day of death. So
Yep, exactly. Anything?
vanity.
Yes. Anything else on these first 12 verses? We can move on, but
I really like this heading here at chapter 9, take life as it comes. Because along with greed and all that is control,
Yeah,
you know,
yes, yes.
wanting to
exactly.
control things and thinking if I can just make such and such happen, then everything will be, yeah.
I'll feel safe and I will finally feel good enough, and except I never do.
Yep.
It's that kind of addiction trap.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I think at some point it talks about anxiety, so we'll,
Do we have time to read verse 13?
yes, let's have,
Because I think that hints of, part of the counterbalance.
yeah,
I think it mentions the poor and that they are not worse off than, wisdom does not belong to those of might.
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
I just think it's important.
yeah, I'll read, chapter 9, verse 13 through chapter 10, verse 7. That's kind of how, they split it up within the commentary, so I'll go there.
18 is a very good verse.
I have also seen this example of wisdom under the sun, and it seemed great to me. There was a little city with a few people in it. A great king came against it and besieged it, building great siege works against it. Now there was found in it a poor wise man, and he by his wisdom delivered the city. Yet no one remembered that poor man. So I said, wisdom is better than might, yet the poor man's wisdom is despised, and his words are not heeded. The quiet words of the wise are more to be heeded than the shouting of a ruler among fools. Wisdom is better than weapons of war, but one bungler destroys much good.
Mhm.
Dead flies make the perfumer's ointment give off a foul odor, so a little folly outweighs wisdom and honor. The heart of the wise inclines to the right, but the heart of a fool to the left. But when fools walk on the road, they lack sense and show to everyone that they are fools. If the anger of the ruler rises against you, do not leave your post, for calmness will undo great offenses. There is an evil that I have seen under the sun, as great an error as if it proceeded from the ruler. Folly is set in many high places, and the rich sit in a low place. I have seen slaves on horseback and princes walking on foot like slaves. So what's going on here?
Well, verse 8 on chapter 10 there. Whoever digs a pit will fall into it.
Be careful what you're working on. Yeah. Just like, keep your wits about you, fool.
Ah.
I'm looking at the second part of that verse.
I know.
World does that. And whoever breaks through a wall will be bitten by a snake.
I guess if it's one of those outdoor walls, you never do know what's on the other side. Oh, there's a lot here about the value of wisdom, even though we've been, kind of leveling the ground all around for chapters here. There's a lot about the superior value of wisdom, and that wisdom should not be attributed only to those who have prominence. That wisdom can be found everywhere, and it can be not found in places that it's expected.
That's right, yes.
And for these people, wisdom was always personified as feminine or the female energy.
Mhm.
And we can forget that. This sounds like a man's talking, but this man is talking about feminine aspect of God. Don't you think?
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm. Mhm.
Which is really funny that you say that, Mariana, because what is happening here is the author is urging realism, right? So let's not pretend that people with power are typically seen as wise. People who have wealth are seen as some superior being who must have this wisdom and knowledge that we all don't, right? But this is saying the poor man is wise.
Mhm.
And yet, because of their identity, because of how they relate to people in the world, wisdom won't be acknowledged and esteemed as it should be,
Mhm.
right?
It can still have effect. is
And it-
what it's-
And it can still have effect,
Even if it's
right?
not acknowledged or appropriately
Yep.
attributed.
Women can be pastors and they can preach, and even if you disagree and don't believe, that work will still be done. They will still preach and their legacy will still continue, right? Right? So,
I've been watching quite a few historical dramas about kings.
mhm,
From the early days, you know, in antiquity up to present time. And how often even groups that believed in divine right of kings knew they had an imbecile. An imbecile that had to be guarded.
yeah,
And had to be in the padded cell at times and could only be brought out on the balcony occasionally. Yeah,
yeah,
and
Dressed up and propped up and
yeah.
prevented from actually doing any policy matters.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
so, I mean, I like reading this. But I also hear that cadence of humor
yes,
and, you know, and don't forget the dog, you know.
yes,
And these people did think dogs were like, almost like vermin. They lived in the street, they weren't allowed in the house, but they were useful.
yeah,
So I think it's this counterbalance all the time of God gave you wits. Now keep them turned on kind of thing. Don't believe everything you're told and keep your mouth shut and your head down when you need to. I don't know. I think it's, there's a lot there that's really
yeah,
quite beautiful.
yes, yes, exactly that, yes. Another thing that kind of happens here is one apple can kind of spoil the bunch kind of idea.
One bubbler destroys much good. We're
Yeah.
kind of living with that.
Yeah. And one thing I thought was interesting too in this commentary is the world can be easily turned upside down, right? But when you have, for us, why we have the concept of the incarnation, which does exactly that, right? I think of Mary's Magnificat, right? The lowly, the high will be, you know, put down from their riches and from their thrones, and the humble will be exalted. Right, so it kind of hints at these things that are explicit, but Mariana's done a good job of reading in between the lines here. Yeah, keep that wisdom, because you never know when it'll come in handy, despite your position or despite how you're viewed or despite what the world views, right? Keep that wisdom.
And let's stand up against it.
Yeah,
So this was a small city with very few people in it. A great powerful king came that laid siege works against it. Who would ever have thought, it would be easy to succumb to the idea there's nothing that can be done, nothing will help us. There's nothing to go against the power of this great king and what he wants to do and his weapons of war.
yeah. And
Well, it takes patience though,
mm,
and fortitude. And so we were listening to something on the radio on the way over, and they were interviewing a woman who was 96. And so she was referring to the June 19th, long time ago. And then it talked a little bit of what happened, in Oklahoma, I guess. Texas. Well, she's from Texas.
Oh, Texas was Juneteenth,
mhm.
Yeah, but
but the Oklahoma massacre.
Yeah.
Yeah.
so that was that. But then it talked about her travels and how she was when Obama was president. And so she started out in Texas and she would go from town to town. This is the 42 part. And then people would give her a ride from here to here. And then she would go even she was loaned the use of a motorhome so she could rest and keep on her journey. So she went clear across and ended up in Washington. And then nothing really happened. I mean, yes, it came to view at what happened, but now here it is, over 100 years ago. It has taken, so there's patience plus fortitude, doing the best. And she was very bright. She was very funny. And you listen to some of our leaders, and I think, she has about 40 times more brain cells than these other people who are in charge. And so it kind of it's in here, but
Yeah.
it's fortitude.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
no,
Not
just
just your beliefs.
wit and
Yeah.
fortitude and patience.
Yeah, much
Yeah.
strength with them, so. Anyway, she was amazing, I would like to, and I had heard her a couple of years ago when on television.
Huh.
And there she was on the radio, and oh, she's just with it.
Wow.
That must have been on it.
No, it was on MSNBC, I think.
Great.
So,
Yeah.
anyway.
All right. Are we ready to move on? Let's do it. Okay. The fun verses in verse 8 and moving forward. Let's see, can I have somebody read verse 8, chapter 10, verse 8 through 17? And then someone pick up at 18 and go through 11, verse 6.
Okay, I'll do verse 8 since I mentioned it.
Okay,
Whoever digs a pit will fall into it, and whoever breaks through a wall will be bitten by a snake. Whoever quarries stones will be hurt by them. Whoever splits logs will be endangered by them. If the iron is blunt and the one does not whet the edge, then more strength must be exerted. But wisdom helps one to succeed. If the snake bites before it is charmed, there is no advantage in a charmer. Words spoken by the wise bring them favor, but the lips of fools consume them. The words of their mouths begin in foolishness, and their talk ends in a wicked madness. Yet fools talk on and on. No one knows what is to happen, and who can tell anyone what the future holds? The toll of fools wears them out, for they do not even know the way to town. Was I supposed to go on?
yeah, keep going to 18. Beth.
Alas for you, O land, when your king is a servant, and your princes feast in the morning. Happy are you, O land, when your king is a nobleman, and your princes feast at the proper time. I didn't get that one. For strength and not for drunkenness. Though sloth the roof,
That's it.
though sloth the roof, 16, and though indulgence, indolence, the house leaks. Feasts are made for laughter, wine gladdens life, and money meets every need. Do not curse a king even in your thoughts, or curse the rich even in your bedroom. For a bird of the air may carry your voice, and some winged creature tell the matter.
Ah,
Yeah, we can stop there. So these verses, and then even going through the first couple of 11, are just kind of a bunch of miscellaneous proverbs, just
Confucianism.
just a couple of things that the author wants you to remember, important for life. So since we brought up verse 8, let's talk about it a little bit. What do you think that means? What's going on there? Whoever digs a pit will fall into it, and whoever breaks through a wall will be bitten by a snake.
Well, what's lovely about so many of these things is that they were both on a literal and a metaphorical kind of sense. So there's all kinds of ways of digging a pit besides actually physically digging a pit. It's like the saying that whoever imprisons anything also imprisons themselves. That's the jailer. So that whatever you do, you're involved in all the implications and consequences of it. And some of these things must be done. It's not that they're necessarily evil within themselves. Splitting logs needs to be done. Digging a pit needs to happen sometimes. But there are consequences and implications of doing these things.
Yep.
The pit is also a web. It's like he who weaves a web, is trapped in it. Same thing.
Yeah.
And some of them are just funny, like the snake bites before it's turned.
these are. Digging a pit or what is it, quarrying stones, splitting logs. Are not necessarily bad things.
Yeah.
No.
They're things that have to be done.
Mhm.
This is a bit too metaphorical.
Well, even digging the pit is important because if you dig get those roots out, the plants won't grow. So,
No, you need to do all these things. These are just practical things of carrying on life.
Yep.
But wisdom knows that there are other things associated with that besides the good or necessary that you intend to do.
Yes, it all goes back to wisdom. This all goes back to wisdom, right? Have good judgment in doing these things.
Well, and keep your wits about you when you're at your business.
Exactly.
Thinking in today's modern, like plumbers and construction workers have safety rules, and if they wander off in thought, the guy working next to him is supposed to, hey, it's not just the foreman, but we're to call ourselves back to the task.
Yep.
Teachers do that with kids in class.
Yep.
Get back, what do you think? Are you, and I think there's that, don't set a trap for somebody, but also when you're about your labor, it has dangers.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Including the labor of giving birth.
Mhm.
We face a troubled world in many of the tasks that have to be done, but such as life.
Yeah.
Mhm.
But keeping our wits about us, farm accidents
Yep.
Exactly.
Mhm.
often happen when somebody was up too late the night before or was thinking about something else rather than the task. And so I think there's something about that. Keep your tools sharp,
Mhm.
Yep.
not just your axe.
Yeah,
Mhm.
exactly.
I've got a quick story for you in regards to that. My dad was getting up in years. He was probably about 94, 95. And he said, I want you to go over to the duplex over there and I want you to turn on the heater, the flames going out. And he got a blowtorch. That's what he used to do that. I wasn't too excited about doing that. So he went over there with me. So I'm down there using that blowtorch to turn the heater on. And Dad's watching me closely. I'm not touching him too well. All of a sudden, I feel this whack on my hand and he's knocking the blowtorch out of my hand. And the reason was I was kind of moving it this way. So he was concentrating because he knew
Yeah.
what might happen. I was concentrating on the place blowing up and not thinking about.
Yeah, that's a
Wow.
good story. Yeah,
It
I
is a
think
good
it
story.
talks exactly to what you're saying here. Yeah.
It's a very practical level.
It's
Yeah.
incredibly practical, right?
Mhm.
Disaster will follow if you are not about your wits, if you aren't paying attention to what needs to be done, what needs to happen. Disaster can strike, so be wise, have good judgment, and we hope that it'll be avoided.
Yes, every time a pit is dug, somebody does not fall into it.
Exactly. And then the first kind of 6 verses of chapter 11 talk about like natural disasters, and then it ends with this idea, just as you do not know how the breath comes to the bones in the mother's womb, so you don't know the work of God who makes everything. In the morning sow your seed, and at evening do not let your hands be idle, for you do not know which will prosper, this or that, or whether both alike will be good.
And verse 11, it is talking about charity.
Mhm.
When, Jesus talked about this too. Send out your bread upon the water.
Mhm.
Well, we all know we don't throw our bread on the water, but what that means is benevolence,
Yeah, generosity.
generosity.
Yeah, divide. What does it say here? Divide your means 7 ways or even 8.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's not prominent, but it's there.
Yeah,
Mhm.
That's assumed that you aren't gonna forget that. Not everything is, you're supposed, the 10 Commandments and God, but
yeah,
here we are. Here's your wine, here's your bread. No,
yeah.
don't give
Share.
up. I don't know. I
Share.
just think it is a charming book of wisdom.
It is. Michael, yes.
I divide your bread, your means 7 ways or even 8. I'm not convinced that he means to help others. I'm convinced, I still think he's saying Look out for yourself, for you do not know what disaster may happen on earth.
Yeah,
It
you're
could
actually
be,
right. It's
it could-
diversifying your portfolio.
it could be suggesting frugality.
Yeah.
You know, don't eat your bread all at once, divide it into many portions, so you'll have something for the future. So that's another way to think about it. Yeah,
Definitely.
It's not specific. no.
It's not
It could mean all
specific.
kinds of things.
Yeah, but the intent here is thought to be that he's literally saying diversify your portfolio.
oh,
You don't
really?
know what will happen tomorrow,
Okay.
right?
Huh.
But also we know that it's not about getting back necessarily the money or the wealth. If you do send it out, you receive the satisfaction when you help others. You get
Mhm.
something back in return that is
Mhm.
invaluable,
Mhm.
right? So it's kind of both, even though that's kind of the original meaning of, yeah, do the best you can, even when conditions are unsuitable. Do the best you can, do it wisely, even if you don't know the outcome. Right?
Because you don't and you can't.
Because you don't
Because the
and you
following
can't,
verse is-
exactly. Okay. Getting close to time. Could someone read verses 7 through 10? And we'll talk about that, and I want to end with 1 through 8. So, Lynn, do you mind reading verses 7 through 10?
Light is sweet, and it is pleasant for the eyes to see the sun. Even those who live many years should rejoice in them. Rejoice in them all. Yet let them remember that the days of darkness will be many. All that comes is vanity. Rejoice, a young man, while you are young, and let your heart cheer you in the days of your youth. Follow the inclination of your heart and the desire of your eyes. But know that for all these things, God will bring you into judgment. Banish anxiety from your mind and put away pain from your body. For youth and the dawn of life are vanity.
That's good, yeah, thank you. So what's going on here?
Well, it appears to be based on the lesson, last Sunday or the Sunday before, which I mentioned the Greeks in the Middle Ages. The Greeks lived life for right now, physical fitness, being pretty, whatever the case may be. And in the Middle Ages, life was sad, and the only concentration was getting ready for the afterlife, as you mentioned just a little bit earlier, so that things will get better down the road. So it seems a little bit like that there.
Yeah. I'm gonna read verse 9 again. Okay, you're follow along with me in reading it. Rejoice, young man, while you are young, and let your heart cheer you in the days of your youth. Follow the inclination of your heart and the desire of your eyes, but know that for all these things, God will bring you into judgment. Let me read it one more time. I'm gonna switch it up a little bit. Rejoice, young man, while you are young, and let your heart cheer you in the days of your youth. Follow the inclination of your heart and the desires of your eyes, and know that for all these things, God will bring you into judgment.
Is it a warning?
Is it? Is it a warning? What is it warning? What do you think it's warning people about?
Too soon, what is it? Too long wise, not wise enough soon enough, and don't squander. It says you may do this, it doesn't say you shall do this. I think that it's. Is it inevitable that we will do whatever we want when we're moving from childhood into adulthood and postpone that longer than is a good idea?
I'm sitting here and these little pieces of paper here are, and one part of it, advice and well-being and well wishes. So just listening to the beginning of this, rejoice, young man, while you are young, and let your heart cheer you in the days of your youth. Follow the inclination of your heart and the desire of your eyes. Oh, that sounded pretty good. But then, okay, I could probably write that. But know that for all these things, God will bring you into judgment. That, well, maybe that would be such a good verse to put on this little paper and advice.
Judgment does not always mean being judged against.
Negative.
Either.
Mhm,
Depends on what
mhm,
the inclination of your heart is and what you have in your heart.
mhm. Mm,
But he doesn't say. He says, follow the inclination of your heart and the desire of your eyes.
Mhm.
Uh-huh.
There's a difference.
Right. However,
Yeah, and
but he doesn't say do it wisely. He just said, do it. Watch out.
I think that's exactly right. Do it, right? This is actually an imperative to enjoy life,
uh-huh,
right?
This is your time.
This is your time. Live it up, right? And this judgment is not necessarily a condemnation.
mhm,
It says God, it's really interesting the way that they've interpreted it and seen it. It's that God won't judge you for what you've done, but what you didn't do.
mhm,
Oh.
mhm,
God holds you responsible to enjoy your life.
mhm. Yeah. Yeah,
Right.
we talked about that last week,
Right.
that in Judaism, there's that you will be held accountable for everything you didn't enjoy.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Right,
So
it's an
it's like denying the gifts of God. and-
Yeah.
Mhm,
it's an evaluation, this judgment is more like evaluating of a life fully lived.
mhm,
And it's not just some prior condemnation of a desire to live a full life.
mhm.
And how weird and how different is that, right? I think it is hard for us to wrap our heads around, because like Michael keeps alluding to, it's like, oh, what the heck, like, what do you mean? Like, is this what Jesus wants for our life, right? And that's what the lens that we view it in, right?
Mhm.
As humans and as Jesus followers, right? Jesus says, love your neighbor as yourself.
Yeah.
But we forget that as yourself part,
Mhm,
right?
mhm.
So often we forget that as yourself part.
Yeah.
There are days when I don't eat lunch
Mm.
or breakfast, and I've had a cup of coffee and I'm wired until like 6 o'clock when my husband comes home and makes dinner. And do I want that for my neighbor?
Mhm.
Do I want my neighbor to also not be fueled throughout the day, to not have the nutrients they need?
Mhm.
Right? I don't. I make sure my sister eats. I make sure Matt has food. I make sure my dogs eat,
Yeah.
right? I make sure that they get fed and they get their toys and they get their playtime and they enjoy this freaking life. And I don't sometimes do that for myself.
Yeah,
And we all do that,
Yeah.
right?
yeah,
Right? And it's so funny that we forget that as yourself part.
yeah. It's almost as if it should be flipped.
Yes.
Love yourself and love your neighbor too.
Yeah.
Then you'll be more prepared to love your neighbor if you've taken good care of yourself.
Yes.
So easy to drop off the last part of anything.
Yep, it is.
Yeah.
It so is.
Yeah.
And again, it's not just like a have to, right? Like and that's where I'm moving away from, is like, I have to eat, right? I hate making food. It's like, I have to eat to live, right? But why not find stuff that I
That you
enjoy,
enjoy.
that I
Yeah.
enjoy to eat? That I don't have to make a meal.
Yeah.
I can make my little charcuterie board of meats and cheeses at
Exactly.
11 a.m. because I enjoy that,
Mhm.
right? Not every food is a breakfast food. I've learned
Mhm.
that's
Yeah.
something big within therapy too, right? Any food can be eaten at any time.
Yeah.
You can have pancakes
Mhm.
for dinner.
Yeah.
You can have tacos for breakfast.
Yeah.
Like, we assign these things, but if you want to
Yeah.
enjoy tacos at 9 a.m., enjoy tacos at 9 a.m.
It's
Mhm.
good
Right?
nutrition.
It's
Mhm.
imperative that you do Ecclesiastes,
Fuel in the furnace. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And
It's super
Ecclesiastes
important.
tells us you don't have to pick things that you really don't like. There
Yeah.
are things that you do and can enjoy, and life is too short for you to stuff yourself
Mhm.
with stuff that you don't even like to eat.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And I think it's important in here too, if there isn't any condemnation, it says, well, judge other people if they also don't like the things that you don't like, right? That's not in here. It says, take care of yourself, my friend. Make sure you're doing okay before you judge other people.
Mhm.
Before you start calling people out for stuff that you don't like. It says, worry about your own eyes, what you like and what you care about, because that is true enjoyment, not bringing other people down of what they don't like or what they don't do. Right? All of this is true. It is to yourself, because if you're caring about yourself, you have less time to be judging other people about what they are doing or aren't doing,
Mhm.
and potentially allows you to love and care for people better instead of judging them. Right?
Well, I think it's interesting. At the very end, he says, oh, by the way, keep God's commandments.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Does.
yeah.
Fear God and keep his commandments.
Yep.
Mhm.
Yep.
But I think we've been going through all these prophets who are talking about, oh, nobody's keeping the commandments. So God is going to do terrible things to them.
Yeah.
But Ecclesiastes says, well, so what? But, oh, by the way, if you have time to do it in your busy life, keep God's commandments.
Yeah.
Well, I think we forget in modern day Christianity that they didn't come and sit in pews for a sermon.
Mm-hmm.
And the rabbis or the scholars sat with the scrolls open.
Mm-hmm.
And one would say, this is wisdom, this is truth. And then they would say, just a minute here, there's always an anecdote.
Yep.
Antidote.
Yep.
There's always when this goes too far, remember this.
Yep.
And you'll have feast days, have them, but see if you can't squirrel a little away to share with your neighbor in hard times or your own family. Measure what you have, but have a ball. There's nothing in here that says there are times for fasting, but don't fast at the feast,
Yes.
Mhm.
and don't drag out rich food when people are fasting and mourning.
Yeah.
There's a balance
Mhm.
of when you do what.
Yep.
I just think that this is to remind us that, you know, when you fast, wash your face and don't let everyone know you're fasting.
Yeah.
Don't, oh, woe is me, just, you know,
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
wash your face, get out there, do what you can, and
Mhm.
let somebody help you or ask for help when you need it. I mean, it's all there. It's when we try to just do one thing we found that we're more apt to miss out on the glory of God.
Mhm.
And
Just-
that you are not required to create suffering for yourself
Yeah,
as a way of being good,
yeah,
Mhm.
when suffering is not necessary.
it'll come.
Mhm.
Yeah, it'll just come, but you don't need to create it for yourself
Mhm.
when it's not necessary to be some idea of good, because that is not what.
Mhm.
We didn't get to it, and that's totally okay, but I encourage you to read chapter 12 and the first 8 verses. This was such good conversation, but it talks about the creeping of old age and the collapse that comes with it. Right? With the things that become harder to do as you become older. And so it ends with that, having all this previously said, right? Enjoy the life while you can, because at some point, there's a lot of metaphors in the first 8 verses here
Mhm.
about how difficult it is to do all those things.
Mhm.
And you hope that those memories will continue to sustain you as it comes, right? It's inevitable. It's coming for all of us.
Mhm.
And so, as you said, at the end of the matter, verse 13, all has been heard, fear God and keep his commandments, for what that is the whole duty of everyone. For God will bring every deed into judgment, including every single thing, whether good or evil. So it sounds also like it's pretty easy to keep the commandments if you're doing things out of a good place, out of a wise place, out of the place of care for yourself and others. It shouldn't be that hard to not follow the commandments, right?
Mhm.
They're guidelines. They're not, they're not the basis. They're live your life, and out of that, remember these things. And if you're living your life good, it should be pretty easy to do. that is enough for today.
Well, thank
We know
you.
there is hope eternal, right? It's not the end all. But yeah, thank you all. This is great.
Thank you, Tessa.
Thank you.
Thanks, John.
Bye, everyone. See you in